Picture a room with 60 feet of white tablecloth, 400 candles, and 112 dishes arranged in patterns so precise they were probably planned with a ruler. Now fill it with 30 people who've been waiting their entire lives to assess you. Add the fact that you have 7 forks and you know what approximately 4 of them are for. Add that the most important man in the room is watching you from across that table, and you cannot look at him because looking would be obvious, but not looking feels like its own kind of error. Add that the woman on your left knows exactly what you are worth on the social market to the penny, and the woman on your right has been doing this since before you could walk, and you have been doing it for approximately 90 minutes. That's a Regency supper. London, 1814. The age of elegance, they'll call it. Which is what you say about an era when you're standing far enough away that you can't feel the terror of it anymore. The age of Jane Austen's drawing rooms, Beau Brummell's cravats, Nash's white terraces going up along Regent Street like teeth in a new jaw. The age when Napoleon had just been defeated and all of London was euphoric, and everyone who mattered was in town, and every supper table in Mayfair was a battlefield with silverware. The age when a young woman's entire future could end on a single wrong note. Not a wrong fork, not a wrong word, a wrong beat, a wrong half second. A moment of inattention that every person in the room saw, and that nobody would ever mention. Because the cruelest thing about Regency society is that it destroys you in absolute silence. I make these history stories about forgotten worlds, and honestly, I have no idea if anyone sleeps to them, or if you're all just people who need someone to explain the social anxiety of 1814 at 11 o'clock at night so you can feel better about your own. Either way, get comfortable. We're going back. One evening, one supper, one mistake. We're living every second of it. Here we go. The candles in your lodgings on Brook Street are already lit when Bess comes to dress you, and the smell of them is the first thing you are aware of on this particular evening in June, which is hot tallow and beeswax and the faint dry scorch of a wick that needs trimming. 4 candles around the looking-glass above your dressing table. Your mother put them there herself an hour ago, which is how you know she's frightened, because your mother does not micromanage candle placement unless something is at stake. Everything is at stake. Bess helps you into your stays. Her hands are quick and sure, and she's been doing this every evening of your lodging life without event. But tonight her fingers are tighter than usual, or you're more aware of them, and the bones of the corset press against your ribs with an insistence that makes it necessary to breathe carefully. This is, you're aware, partly practical and partly symbolic. The whole architecture of how a woman dresses in 1814 is a kind of training in self-containment. Everything held in, everything placed correctly, everything showing only what had been decided to show. The dress is white muslin with a lavender sash. It is the finest dress you own. Your mother had it made last autumn from fabric she spent 3 weeks choosing at a mercer's on Oxford Street, comparing the weights and the drape of each bolt in the light from the shop window, feeling how each sample moved when she shook it from the bolt. It cost £4, 12 shillings. Your father, the curate, earns roughly £40 in a year, after the rent on these lodgings and the coal and the food and the small expenses of 3 people, trying to exist decently in a city that charges for every inch of decency. £4, 12 shillings, for this evening. You look at yourself in the looking-glass. Bess has arranged your hair the way your mother approved from La Belle Assemblée. Curls at the temples, a knot at the back, small pearl pins that are not real pearls. Your complexion is good, which your mother considers your finest asset, and which she has protected since you were 12 by forbidding you to walk in direct sunlight without a bonnet. Your eyes are a clear grey-brown. Your nose is a little too strong for fashion, but within the range of acceptability for a face. You're 19 years old, and you are, by your mother's honest assessment and yours, presentable. Not beautiful, presentable. Tonight, presentable is being asked to do considerable work. Hold still, your mother says, appearing in the mirror behind you. She's adjusting the back of the sash with the focused attention of someone making a final check before a significant operation. Her hands move with the brisk economy of a woman who has done this 100 times and knows exactly what correct looks like. How long do we have? The hackney comes at 7. She steps back, assesses. The gloves. The new white gloves. 6 shillings for the pair, which is another measure of how seriously this evening's being taken. You pull them on, button the small pearl buttons at the wrist. The leather is stiff and clean and smells faintly of the tannery, and it will soften against your palms as the evening goes on. Lady Hartwell suppers, your mother says, in the tone she uses for information she's delivering for the final time of many, are not like other suppers. There will be people present whose names you recognise from the newspapers. There will be people whose names you should know but may not, and in those cases you will smile and engage and find me afterward. Yes, Mamma. Mr. Thrale will almost certainly be present. Mrs. Jennings had it from Lady Hartwell's own secretary. Mr. Thrale. Yes. You are aware of Mr. Thrale. Your mother has been conducting a careful, thorough, one-sided reconnaissance of Mr. Thrale for 3 weeks. He is 28. He has a house in Wiltshire and an income of 6,000 a year, which is comfortable without being spectacular, but would be, for a curate's daughter with no dowry and no prospects beyond her mother's intelligence and her own presentability, the difference between a life with margin in it and a life without one. I won't follow him around the drawing room, you say. Nobody said anything about following. Your mother adjusts her own gloves. I'm simply saying that if the opportunity arises to be introduced, you will not retreat behind shyness. I don't retreat behind shyness. You were very quiet at the Moorlands Assembly. I was unwell at the Moorlands Assembly. You were shy, your mother says pleasantly, and this is probably true and you cannot argue. So you look back at the looking-glass and check the pearl pins one more time and breathe carefully against your stays. The hackney is punctual. It smells of old leather and horse sweat and the residue of every previous passenger's particular combination of nerves and perfume. You and your mother sit with your back straight and your hands folded and your faces composed, which is what you do in public. Which is what you have been taught to do in public since you were old enough to understand that composure is a form of armour. Outside, London is doing what London does in June at 7 in the evening, being enormous. The streets of Mayfair are not like the streets of the Strand or the City, which are busy in a functional way, loaded with the commerce and the noise of 100,000 people doing work that needs doing. Mayfair streets are busy in a different way. A performed way, a way that involves people in very good clothes going to places that matter, in vehicles that advertise their quality, accompanied by servants who advertise their employer's capacity to employ them. You watch it through the hackney window. A carriage, a proper private carriage, dark blue with a coat of arms on the panel, passing in the other direction with 2 footmen clinging to the back-in livery. A woman in a yellow gown descending from a chair carried by 2 men onto the steps of a house in Hertford Street. Shop fronts already starting to close, their shutters going up in the particular sequence of a city settling into its evening mode. A flower seller on the corner of Park Lane, her basket nearly empty, selling the last of her stock to a man in an evening coat who buys a small bunch of something white and tucks it into his buttonhole. Napoleon surrendered 7 weeks ago. The whole city is still giddy with it. After 20 years of war, the thing has finally ended. And London in the summer of 1814 is a city that has not yet figured out how to exhale properly. There are parties almost every night. There are celebrations in the parks. The Tsar of Russia is visiting, which is causing a kind of organised social hysteria in Mayfair that involves hostesses competing for the honour of entertaining foreign royalty, and the foreign royalty apparently attending everything and enjoying nothing. This is one reason Lady Hartwell's supper matters. Not because the Tsar will be there. He won't. Lady Hartwell's guest list is selected rather than comprehensive. But because everyone who is anyone is in London right now. The estates are empty. The men who might ordinarily be at their country properties, overseeing the harvest or the drainage or the tenant disputes, are in London, attending their clubs and the opera and suppers in Grosvenor Square. And Lady Hartwell, who has been running the best supper table in Mayfair for 30 years, is not going to waste this concentration of consequence. You have been waiting for this evening for 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks you have read every volume of etiquette your mother owns, practised your curtsies until your knees ached, rehearsed conversational openers on subjects ranging from the recent peace to the new architecture to Italian opera, and attempted on 7 separate occasions to remember which fork is which without looking, which remains your most persistent and anxiety-inducing challenge. 7 forks laid out at your plate, each one meaning something, each one watched by someone. The carriage turns north and then west into the quiet order of Grosvenor Square, and you see the house. Lady Hartwell's house is number 17. 4 stories of Portland stone, 6 windows wide, iron railings, a fanlight above the door throwing warm amber light onto the stone steps, 2 footmen in livery at the entrance, still and correct, their faces arranged into the professional blankness of people whose job requires them to be both present and invisible simultaneously. 3 carriages already drawn up ahead of you, and yours is a hackney, which is to say it is a hired cab, which is to say that the coachman will leave immediately after depositing you, which is to say that it will be entirely obvious to anyone paying attention that you do not have a private vehicle, which is entirely obvious anyway from every other indicator of your circumstances present in this situation, so you simply get down from the hackney with as much composure as you can manage and walk up the steps. The footman opens the door before you reach it. The entrance hall is broad and high-ceilinged and smells of beeswax and flowers, and the warm compressed air of a house that has been heated by many fireplaces in preparation for many guests. The walls are pale green above white plasterwork, a chandelier overhead, its 100 or so candles burning without flicker in the still air. A side table with a massive arrangement of white roses and something with tiny blue flowers, whose name you do not know. The floor is black and white marble, its pattern so clean it might have been laid this morning. A butler materialized from somewhere ahead of you, perhaps 60 years old. The particular kind of professional dignity that reads as having been born in evening dress. Mrs. Crane. Miss Crane. He knows your names, which means your mother gave them in advance, which means your mother has been planning the logistics of this evening with a thoroughness you find both touching and somewhat alarming. You surrender your cloak to a maid. There's a tall mirror in the hall, larger than anything in your lodgings, lit well. You catch a glimpse of yourself and feel a quick spike of something adjacent to confidence. The dress is right. The hair is right. You are as prepared as 3 weeks of preparation can make a person. Up the stairs, the sound of voices growing from above, and then the drawing room. Lady Hartwell's drawing room is large. not in the way that makes a room feel empty, but in the way that makes the people in it feel significant because they have been chosen to fill it. Perhaps 20 people already present, with the trickle of arrival still happening. Candlelight everywhere, in branches on the walls and on the mantelpiece and in the chandelier above, so that the room exists in a quality of gold warmth that everything inside it looks its very best by. Everything in this room is expensive in the particular way that old money makes things expensive, without announcement. The silk damask curtains in deep honey gold, faded to just the right degree of wear, the sofas in old rose velvet, the carpet that is almost certainly Turkish, and almost certainly old enough to be considered valuable rather than merely costly. The pianoforte in the corner with a vase of white roses on its lid. A painting on the far wall that you recognise vaguely as Dutch, and that your mother told you is worth more than the house you grew up in. And Lady Hartwell herself near the fireplace receiving. She's ageless in the way of very wealthy women who have never done physical labour. White hair dressed high, a gown of deep purple silk, jewels at her throat that are clearly real, with the subdued glow of stones that have nothing to prove. Her manner suggests she invented drawing rooms and all events occurring in them. "Mrs. Crane," she says. "And Miss Crane?" She says your names with a particular quality of composure that tells you several things simultaneously. It tells you she knows who you are and who your father is and approximately what your circumstances are. It tells you she has admitted you to her house for a reason, whether that reason is genuine social investment, or a favour to someone else, or pure curiosity about a curate's daughter someone has spoken well of. It tells you the outcome of this experiment is not yet determined. Your mother performs her curtsy. It is absolutely correct, of a depth precisely calibrated to Lady Hartwell's social position and your own, no more and no less. Then you perform yours, 40 rehearsals in the bedroom mirror. You feel your knees complain slightly and ignore them. Lady Hartwell looks at you for a moment with the calm assessment of someone who has been doing this for 30 years and can read a person in 5 seconds. She doesn't do it unkindly. She simply does it. "How pleasant," she says, which means nothing and everything, as such phrases always do. Your mother steers you, with the practised efficiency of a woman navigating social terrain by instinct, toward a sofa near the window where a woman named Mrs. Somerset is sitting. Mrs. Somerset is someone your mother knows from a season 15 years ago, and who tonight is being deployed as what you privately think of as a social flotation device. A person of sufficient standing to anchor you respectably while you find your footing, and of sufficient warmth that standing near her will not seem desperate. She's perhaps late 40s, comfortable looking with an elaborate lace cap, and the expression of someone who finds the whole world mildly amusing. Beside her, a girl about your age, fair hair, an expression of polite terror you recognise because you are currently wearing it. "Miss Somerset," your mother says after the introductions. "May I present my daughter, Miss Eleanor Crane?" "Miss Crane," says Miss Somerset. "Miss Somerset." A brief pause. You both register the mutual terror and arrive at a silent agreement. "Have you been to many of Lady Hartwell's evenings?" she asks. "This is my first." "You?" "We came up from Worcestershire last week," she says. "My mother is terrified of being unfashionable." A small pause. "I am terrified of the seating arrangements." You feel immediate warmth toward her. The seating arrangements are a genuine and separate terror from the general terror of the evening, and the fact that she has named it directly without pretending to be above it is the sort of honesty that makes a person easy to trust. "I don't know them yet," you say. "Neither do I." My mother says the precedence system is completely logical if you understand it. Does your mother understand it? Harriet Somerset looks at you. She pretends to, she says. Around you the room fills. You watch it with the attention you've learned to give rooms, quiet and comprehensive, from a position that permits good sight lines while appearing to require none. The man in military dress near the door. Cavalry regiment, you think. From the uniform, 2 medals, 1 a peninsular ribbon. He knows exactly what effect he's having and is deploying it with the ease of long practice. He has been to the war. He has fought in Spain. He's currently using this fact as other men use a good coat. The 2 women by the windows in the pale blue and the cream, both watching the room with the same quiet inventory you're conducting. The one in pale blue with the blonde ringlets, you realise after a moment, is Miss Ashworth. You know her by description. Daughter of Sir Philip Ashworth. Baronet. Excellent family. Excellent connections. 2 seasons done, and 21 to your 19, with the confidence that comes from that. She catches your eye across the room for precisely 1 second. Not hostile, not friendly, just noting, and looks away. You look at your gloves. Colonel Farnsworth, 60-ish, near the fireplace. A folded piece of paper beginning to emerge from his coat pocket. Something he wants to show someone. His face is asking the room for permission to show it. And then, standing slightly apart from the nearest conversation cluster near the far window, the tall man in the dark coat with the slightly rumpled cravat. Perhaps 28. Long face, brown eyes, a quality of stillness about him that draws the eye precisely because everyone else in the room is performing, doing the small constant work of sociability, the tilted heads and the polite laughs and the gestures of engagement, and he is simply standing, watching, as though he is doing the same inventory of the room that you are. That is Mr. Thrale, your mother says at your elbow, appearing with the quiet efficiency of someone who's been doing reconnaissance while you are looking at Miss Ashworth. Mrs. Somerset has confirmed it. You do not stare. You look at your gloves again. The room continues to fill, and the temperature rises slightly with the bodies and the candles, and the smell of it shifts from flowers and beeswax to flowers and beeswax, and the various perfumes of 20 well-dressed people, and the particular warm human smell of a room that has sealed itself for an evening. Somewhere underneath everything, the kitchen, a distant ghost of roasting meat and something sweet, the smell of a cook who's been working since before noon on the meal that is coming. You talk to Mrs. Somerset about the summer, about the celebrations in the park since Napoleon's defeat, about whether the new Nash buildings going up along Regent Street are an improvement to the city or a disruption of it. Mrs. Somerset has opinions about Nash that are warm and detailed and suggests she has been following the construction with genuine interest. Then Colonel Farnsworth appears at her elbow with his piece of folded paper. He shows it to Mrs. Somerset. She smiles politely and says something admiring and looks for the nearest exit from the conversation. You take a breath. Colonel Farnsworth, you say. He turns to you with the expression of someone who has been looking for an audience for some time. Miss Crane, says Mrs. Somerset, introducing you. My daughter's friend. The Colonel unfolds the paper. It is a pencil drawing of a rose, careful and exact, every petal rendered with the attention of someone who truly saw the thing they were drawing. The stem, the leaves, the way the outer petals curl slightly away from the centre. Your work, you ask? My wife's, he says, and something in his face shifts. She was the botanist, the real one. I simply tend what she built. You look at the drawing properly, not politely, actually looking. She had excellent eyes, you say, the shading on the outer petals. She understood how the light falls differently on the open part than the closed. The Colonel looks at you, not with surprise exactly, with recognition. You talk about the roses for 11 minutes, not about roses generally, about his roses in Hertfordshire, the ones his wife planted and designed, and that he has maintained since her death, with the devotion of a man performing an act of love that has nowhere else to go. He names varieties. He explains grafting. He talks about the prize the local horticultural society awarded last autumn, and how he stood at the presentation thinking that she should be standing there, and that the prize was really hers by proxy, which is not how prizes work, but which is how grief works. "You've kept all her drawings?" you ask. He pats his coat pocket. "I carry several. One never knows when a conversation might need them. Mrs. Somerset has long since drifted away. You don't notice. Then Colonel Farnsworth is claimed by Mrs. Harrison, who is circulating with the professional efficiency of a woman whose function at these evenings is social facilitation, and you are briefly alone by the window with your ratafia, which is sweet and too warm, and which you're drinking slowly because a woman who finishes her drink has nothing to hold. Miss Crane, you turn. The woman is perhaps 35, sharp face, a gown in deep green that suits her in the way that gowns suit people who have spent actual time thinking about colour. She looks at you with the expression of someone who finds you interesting rather than either threatening or negligible, which is uncommon enough in this room to make you straighten. "Lady Vane," she says, offering her hand with the expectation that you know this name. You do know it. Lady Vane is the widow of Sir Thomas Vane, killed at Salamanca in 1812. She's known in your mother's circles as someone who's been ruined twice and rebuilt herself both times, and achieved the particular social immunity that sometimes comes to women who have survived enough that they have stopped being afraid of anything. She is considered witty. She is not universally liked. This, you have learned, usually tells you more about the people who dislike someone than about the person. "Miss Eleanor Crane," you say. "My father is curate at St. Martin's in the Fields." "I know who your father is," she says. "Mrs. Jennings told me you were coming. She said you were clever, which in this room is either an advantage or a liability, depending on how visible you let it be." "That's rather direct," you say. "It's efficient. You finished one conversation successfully, but not in a way that led to a second, and now you're recalibrating." She looks at you steadily. "Am I wrong? You choose gratitude over offence." "Not entirely," you say. She nods. A small assessment passed. "Mr. Thrale," she says, with a small inclination of her head toward the far window, "has asked twice who you are. In the last 20 minutes. Mrs. Harrison told him." He nodded and went back to looking at you while believing himself unobserved, which is a point in his favour. It means he's doing his own reconnaissance instead of waiting for his hostess to manage everything. A pause. He's a good man. Genuinely so, which is rarer than it should be. He's slow to speak, but not because he has nothing to say. His first wife. You feel yourself go still. "I didn't know he'd been married." Lady Vane looks at you with the calm of someone delivering necessary information. "His first wife died in childbed 3 years ago. The child as well. He hasn't spoken of it publicly. You would not know unless told. Now you know, so you will not accidentally say something about fresh beginnings in life or the renewal that comes with new attachments, which people say without thinking at suppers like this one, and which must be like a knife in him each time." Silence between you for a moment. Around you the room performs its sociability. "Thank you," you say. Don't thank me. Do me the small service of being interesting at supper. I'll be at the lower end of the table trying to survive an evening with Mr. Oswald, who owns 3,000 acres in Norfolk and wishes to discuss every one of them." She moves away. You stand with your ratafia and look across the room at Mr. Thrale. He is looking at you. He finds you looking at him and does not look away. He nods very slightly, in a way that is both acknowledgement and something else. You nod back. Your heart, which has been conducting its anxious percussion against your stays all evening, does something different. Not calmer, just different. Then Mrs. Harrison appears at your elbow with the timing of a stage manager and says, "Miss Crane, may I present Mr. Thrale?" And the introduction happens the way these things happen at parties. Organised accident, managed coincidence, and suddenly he is in front of you. Taller close up. The cravat is indeed slightly rumpled, in a way that could be carelessness or could be deliberate, and you decide after a moment that it is probably deliberate, because a man who lives in Mayfair in 1814 with 6,000 a year, and has presumably been to his valet this evening, has had opportunity to fix a cravat, and the fact that it remains slightly wrong suggests it has been left that way on purpose, which is either a statement about Brummell's tyranny over men's wardrobes or a form of self-expression so subtle as to be almost invisible. "Miss Crane," he says. "Mr. Thrale." Mrs. Harrison evaporates. She's very good at this. A brief pause while you both locate the beginning of a conversation. "Mrs. Harrison's intelligence was optimistic, you say." "My father's agricultural interest is limited to a pamphlet on crop rotation he received 3 years ago, and some general enthusiasm for the concept of improved drainage." He considers this, then slightly he smiles. It changes his face considerably. "My own knowledge is considerably more specific," he says, "though I find it doesn't translate well into drawing-room conversation." "Is that why you've been standing near the window by yourself for the last half hour?" He looks at you. "You noticed that?" "I notice things." "What sort of things?" "The Colonel by the fireplace has been carrying a pencil drawing in his coat pocket for 40 minutes, and has shown it to 5 people, each of whom responded politely but not genuinely. The woman in the yellow gown near the door arrived knowing she was the most fashionably dressed person in this room, and has been quietly bored by the absence of competition since, and you haven't touched a drink since you arrived, which means either you don't drink at parties or you're staying alert for something. Mr. Thrale is quiet for a moment. "I don't drink at occasions where I'll need to remember the conversation afterward," he says. "Is tonight one of those occasions?" He looks at you. "Apparently," he says. He says it without particular inflection, which you find you like. It is an answer that means something while leaving room for you to decide how much it means, which is the kind of answer that does considerable work in very few words. "The Colonel's wife died last autumn," you say. He misses her specifically at these evenings because she was the social one and he is not. The drawing is hers. He carries it because when his hand finds it in his pocket in the morning, before he knows what it is, there's a half-second where she could still be there. Mr. Thrale looks across the room at Colonel Farnsworth. "I should speak with him," he says. "You should." A pause. "Will you hold a place in your conversation for later, or is that too presumptuous of someone you've known for approximately 4 minutes? "I'll see what's available," you say. He crosses the room to Colonel Farnsworth. You watch him hold out his hand for the rose sketch and study it with what appears to be genuine interest, and you watch the Colonel's face change the way people's faces change when they have found someone who is actually looking at the thing they want to show. You turn back to the window. Your heart is doing it again. You think, This might actually be all right. You think, be careful. Lady Hartwell's voice rises above the room at 8 o'clock, not loud, not sharp, simply present in the way that the voices of people accustomed to being heard are present, filling the space without effort. Supper, she says, and the room rearranges itself. This is the moment you've been dreading almost as much as the supper itself, which is the ordering of the procession. The ranking of guests into the correct sequence for entering the dining room, based on the arcane and thoroughly merciless hierarchy of British precedence, which is a system so complex and so entirely unrelated to anything like merit or personal quality, that it could only have been created by people who had never had to do anything useful with their time and had therefore devoted it to building an elaborate scaffolding of rank. Duchesses first, then marchionesses, then countesses, viscountesses, baronesses in order of the creation of their husbands' titles, then the wives and daughters of peers rank by the seniority of the peerage, then knights' wives, then the wives and daughters of gentlemen of good family, ranked by the relative antiquity and standing of those families, which is where things become genuinely difficult, because the relative antiquity and standing of families is not written anywhere publicly accessible and must simply be known, and not knowing it is itself a form of social failure. You're near the bottom of this hierarchy, respectably near the bottom, not the absolute bottom, which is occupied by a young clergyman, Lady Hartwell, as apparently invited as a form of charitable inclusion, and who has the expression of a man sitting very still while hoping nobody notices him. Just above him is you. Just above you, your mother. You know this. Your mother has explained it. It is not shameful. It is simply where you are, which is a phrase your mother has used many times in many contexts to mean, this is the fact of your situation, and feeling ashamed of it waste energy that could be spent working with it. You find yourself moving toward the dining room on the arm of a young man you do not know, which is how the system works. You're escorted by whoever on the male side is ranked just above you, and you are his corresponding female, and together you move in the sequence Lady Hartwell has determined with the total mental map she carries of her guest precedents. Mr. Pemberton, 22 or thereabouts, pleasant face, the look of someone who has been instructed to be agreeable and is genuinely trying. He's a clergyman's son. It emerges after the shortest of introductions as you begin to move, which is why he's near the back, and he wears the knowledge of this with a lightness that seems genuine rather than performed. First time, he asks. Yes, you. Lady Hartwell knew my grandfather, he says. I've been living in hope that this provides me with some protective social currency. Though my position in the queue suggests perhaps not, proximity to the door ensures a rapid exit if necessary, you say. He laughs, genuinely. Precisely the silver lining I'd been searching for. And then you're in the dining room. The dining room at number 17 Grosvenor Square is 62 feet long. You know this because you count the windows on the way to finding your seat. 4 along the south wall, 3 along the north, all draped in the same deep honey gold silk as the drawing room. The ceiling is high enough to contain the light of the chandelier above the table without it feeling close. The fireplace at the far end is lit, though the room is warm enough without it, and the table, white damask cloth that has been ironed with a precision that makes it look architectural. Not like cloth at all, but like a surface, a clean white plane stretching the length of the room, every fold placed by intention, and on that surface, the supper. This is service à la Française, not the French language, which you speak passably well and have been doing since your governess taught it, and which your mother considers one of your better social assets. The French method of service. All dishes placed on the table simultaneously at the beginning of each course, arranged in a pattern of geometric formality across the entire cloth. There are 43 dishes in the first course alone. You count them because your hands need to be doing something while your eyes locate your seat. And counting is a form of attention that looks like composure. Tureens of soup at each end, one turtle, one white. According to the arrangement that Lady Hartwell's butler will have planned with the cook weeks ago. Remove dishes down the centre. The fish, a large salmon set off at an angle to catch the candlelight on its silver platter, made dishes in their covered serving vessels, their contents invisible but their arrangement precise, 2 each side of the main remove, smaller dishes at intervals between, butter in ice, salt in tiny silver containers, bread in baskets with folded napkins, and at your place, the cutlery, 3 knives, 2 forks to the left, a smaller fork beyond them, different tines, a soup spoon, a dessert spoon above the plate, already placed for the final course, a small knife, whose purpose you're not entirely sure of. You sit. Mr. Pemberton to your right, Mrs. Blackwood to your left. A woman perhaps 45, dark gown, the composed expression of someone who has attended a great many suppers and finds them all more or less the same. She nods at you with the brief warmth of someone acknowledging the existence of a neighbour without investing in it. The footmen are already moving, 2 of them for every 3 guests, white-gloved, moving with the quiet, practised efficiency of choreography that has been rehearsed, which it has been. Somewhere in this house, probably this morning, these men ran through the positions and the sequence and the angles of approach, with the discipline of performers before a performance. Now they move without error between chairs and walls and each other, carrying and lifting and pouring with the absolute professionalism of people who have made themselves invisible by becoming perfectly competent. The soup is served. You look at the soup spoon, round bowl, to the right of the plate. You lift it. You eat from the side, not the tip. No sound. The soup is clear with chicken and tarragon and something else underneath. A richness that suggests a stock that has been cooking since before you woke this morning. It is excellent. Soup is the one thing you can appreciate without any social calculation whatsoever, because there is no wrong way to feel about excellent soup. Have you been in London long? Mrs. Blackwood asks on your left. 3 years, you say. My father's position brought us here. Do you find it very different from the country? I find it very different from everything, you say, and this makes her smile. The conversation settles. Mr. Pemberton on your right wants to tell you about a very good sermon he heard recently at St. Paul's, which he delivers with the genuine enthusiasm of someone who thinks about sermons the way other people think about theatre. You ask him who the preacher was and what the text was, and he answers at length and with pleasure, and you listen with genuine interest because you are a curate's daughter, and sermons are not entirely foreign country to you, and his analysis is actually quite good. 7 places away and across the table, Mr. Thrale is in conversation with the woman on his right, a handsome woman in red silk who is laughing at something he has said. He looks, in this moment, more relaxed than he did in the drawing-room. The conversation is doing something for him. You look away. You look at your cutlery. The small fork to the inside left. That is the fish fork, for when the salmon is served, you are confident in this. Your mother made you practice it on Thursday until you got it right 3 consecutive times, and could identify it without looking by the weight of it in your hand. The first course removes. The footmen clear the soup tureens, the bread, the butter, and the smaller first-course dishes with the same silent efficiency. And then, moving up the table from the far end, the dishes of the second course appear. The salmon goes. In its place, a turbot in a cream sauce sent in from the kitchen in a covered silver dish that the footman presents at Mrs. Blackwood's left shoulder, for her approval before serving. Mrs. Blackwood takes a portion. The footman moves to you. Small fork. The one with 4 tines, not 3. You take it. You serve yourself a portion that is neither greedy nor unnecessarily small. The turbot is warm, firm, perfectly cooked, in a sauce that smells of cream and some kind of white wine and a herb you can't immediately identify, but which your tongue will suggest is tarragon again, or perhaps chervil. The turbot is remarkable, Mrs. Blackwood says. Isn't it, you say? Lady Hartwell has the same fishmonger her mother used, Billingsgate. She sends specifically for the turbot and the Dover sole, and refuses to use the fashionable men who charge twice the price for half the quality. She considers it a point of principle. This is genuinely useful information, the kind of domestic intelligence that shows you how a well-run household thinks. You file it with the other things you've been filing all evening, the way the candles in the chandelier are spaced to eliminate shadow from the faces of the guests, the way the wine is poured from behind the left shoulder, the way the footmen move so that the path between them is always clear. The conversation around the table rises and falls in 2 registers. The upper end, where Lady Hartwell sits, and where the precedence is highest, has a louder, more general conversation. The piece, the new theatre season, the Elgin marbles, and whether Lord Elgin ought to have brought them. The lower end, where you sit, has the quieter, more careful conversation of people who are not performing for an audience. Mr. Pemberton makes a joke about Nash's plans for the city that is actually very good. You and Mrs. Blackwood both laugh. He looks pleased. Do you think the terraces will outlast us, you ask him. Everything Nash builds outlasts the people who first criticise it, he says. The complaints about them will be indistinguishable from the complaints about every previous generation's idea of improvement. Too large, too white, too full of themselves, too expensive, and in 50 years they'll be considered the finest thing in London, and people will refuse to understand why anyone objected. That's rather optimistic for someone in holy orders, you say. I find buildings easier to be optimistic about than people, he says. People disappoint. Buildings simply deteriorate. The courses progress. A remove of roasted lamb, carved with the skill of a footman who has been doing this for 20 years, the slices fanning out on the platter with the even precision of a hand that knows the joint. Made dishes of fricassee, of vegetables in sauces, of small pastry cases filled with things you cannot see, but whose steam carries sweetness and cream. Salad, more bread, another pour of the wine, which is light and dry and exactly right with the fish. You eat, you talk, you manage the knives, you manage the forks. You do not look at Mr. Thrale more than twice. The second time you look, he is looking back, and he does not look away. And across the 60 feet of white tablecloth and 40-something dishes and 30 people doing their complex social performance, something is very briefly and very clearly said, which is, I see you. Which is, this is interesting. Which is, later. You look down at your plate, you eat a small piece of fricassee, you think, be careful. You think, too late. The third course is the sweet course. Syllabubs, jellies, fruit, little iced cakes, crystallized flowers from the confectioner. A triumph of the cold kitchen. The table that was already beautiful becomes something else. colours and shapes and the gold of the candlelight on glass and sugar, and the smell of it arriving before it is set down, cream and wine and citrus and violets. A syllabub near you in a small glass vessel, the cream clouded from whipping, a shaving of lemon peel on top. You take a portion and eat it with a dessert spoon, and it tastes like June and effort, and the particular pleasure of a thing done beautifully. You are doing this, actually doing it. The fish fork, the conversation, the syllabub, the composure. You are managing it all, and the evening is 2/3 over and nothing terrible has happened, and Mr. Thrale is 7 places down, and he is looking at you. And the conversation with Mr. Pemberton is easy, and Mrs. Blackwood has just told you something very useful about the best fishmonger in Billingsgate. This is going to be fine. This is going well. The conversation at the upper end of the table has become animated about something. The Tsar's visit probably, since that is what half of London is animated about at present. Voices raised. The particular British social sound of people disagreeing politely about something while maintaining all the forms of agreement. Lady Hartwell at her end, managing it with the light hand of an experienced conductor. Mr. Pemberton has been telling you, for the last few minutes, about a plan he has for a charity school in Southwark, where he assists one afternoon a week, and you are genuinely interested and genuinely engaged, and you have just opened your mouth to ask something about the curriculum when you become aware of a change in the sound of the room. Not silence, a change. A particular quality of hush moving from the upper end of the table toward you. A wave. You notice it and keep talking. You notice Mrs. Blackwood on your left beginning to move, a preparation in her posture, a slight gathering of herself, and you look left and you see her hand on the table's edge, preparing to rise, and you look right and Mr. Pemberton has stopped mid-sentence and is looking at you with an expression that you do not understand for half a second and then understand completely. The ladies have been rising for 10 seconds. The Duchess at the far end is already standing. Lady Hartwell is standing. The ripple has come 3/4 of the length of the table. You have not risen. You are the last woman seated at a table of 30 people. The men are waiting. The footmen are waiting. Every person in the room who is paying attention, which is every person in the room, is waiting. You rise. You rise too quickly, which means it is not graceful, and you catch the edge of the tablecloth with your hand as you push back from the table, and it moves a little under your fingers, and your napkin, which was folded across your lap, slides and falls, and the sound it makes landing on the floor is not loud. It is barely any sound at all, but in the sudden hush of a room where every woman is now standing, and every man is waiting, and every footman is performing his disciplined not looking, that small sound is extremely clear. The napkin lies on the floor beside your chair. You do not pick it up. You do not stop to pick it up because stopping would make it worse. And there is no version of this moment that ends well if you stop moving. So you keep moving. You move away from your chair and toward the door, and you walk the length of the room that you need to walk, past the chairs of women who are already filing out ahead of you, and you do not look at Lady Hartwell, and you do not look at Mr. Thrale, and you do not let your face show anything that might be read as either guilt or defiance. You walk to the door. You go through it. Behind you, the dining room releases the breath it has been holding. The withdrawing room on the first floor is already filling with the women who came out before you. Silk on chairs, the low sound of resumed conversation, tea and coffee being arranged by the maids on a side table. You walk in. Your face is composed. This is not a natural condition right now. This is a decision made in the 15 seconds between rising from your chair and reaching this room. Your mother has told you many times that composure is not the absence of feeling, but the management of what your face says about it, and you are managing with everything you have. Your mother appears at your shoulder within 30 seconds. She says nothing. This is, from your mother, a form of communication. The quality of her silence tells you the scale of what happened without requiring her to put it into words, which would require her to give it a size, and she's not ready to do that yet. I did know how she signalled, you say quietly. I know. At other suppers there's an announcement, or a look at the room rather than at one specific person. I know. How bad is it? Your mother is quiet for 2 beats. She's a woman of great practical intelligence, and she is calculating. It depends, she says finally. Lady Hartwell will either read it as ignorance, which can be forgiven, or as arrogance, which cannot. A young woman who didn't know the signal, that is one thing. A young woman who was so absorbed in her conversation that she forgot her function at the table, that is another. Which will she think? She's been doing this for 30 years, your mother says. She is unlikely to make an immediate judgment. A pause. Don't speak to her again tonight unless she addresses you first. Understood. And do not look anxious. Anxiety reads as guilt. Composure reads as a woman who made a mistake and is managing it with sense. Compose yourself. You have had good training. The women arrange themselves around the room with the natural order that forms in these situations. The highest ranked near the best chairs, the others distributing themselves in the social geometry of whose company they prefer. Conversations resume. You sit in the chair your mother selects near the window with a cup of tea you do not want. You hold it. You drink small amounts. You look composed. Miss Ashworth is on the sofa across the room, positioned so that she can see the door for when the men return, which means she can also see you, and occasionally you feel her gaze, not hostile, not pitying, simply noting, as she has been noting you all evening with the steady assessment of someone running a parallel calculation. Harriet Somerset appears beside you and says, in a low voice that suggests she's been preparing it, "The noise at the lower end of the table was terribly distracting. I could barely hear anything." You look at her. "Thank you," you say. "That's kind." "Is it kind?" "I thought it might also be true." "It's both," you say. "Thank you." Lady Vane sits at your other side without ceremony or announcement. She does not look at you for a moment. She takes your teacup from your hands, looks at it, and sets it on the side table. "Don't," she says. "Don't what?" "The replaying, the moment over and over, getting more detailed and more catastrophic each time, until your face starts to show it and everyone in the room who wasn't already watching you starts watching you." You look at her. "I committed a social error in front of 30 people, you say. Yes. In front of Lady Hartwell. Yes. In front of Mr. Thrale. Yes. She looks at you with the same direct steadiness she had in the drawing room. "I have committed worse errors in front of better people. I did not die. The world did not end. You can tell because I am here at this supper, and you are here at this supper, and both of us are still speaking, and there is a fire in the grate and the tea, while terrible is hot." You look at her. "What was your worst?" you ask, because you need the question to pull you back into the room. She considers. "I accused a viscount of cheating at cards," she says, "at his own dinner table, in front of his wife, his mother-in-law, and 2 of his closest friends. I was absolutely correct as it happened. He was marking the cards, but I had no proof equal to his denial, and his social position was sufficient to make my word worthless in the comparison. I apologized publicly. He accepted formally. We have been conducting a Cold War for 11 years, both of us perfectly polite and perfectly implacable. She pauses, and I am still here. You sit with this. The men will come up in 10 minutes, she says. Do not avoid Mr. Thrale. Avoidance reads worse than the thing you're avoiding. What do I say to him? Anything you would have said before. If he has sense, and I believe he does, he didn't see a disaster. He saw you recover from a mistake. How you recover is the thing that gets remembered. The mistake itself is merely the occasion for it. The drawing room continues around you. The music has been requested. The young woman with excellent posture has been persuaded to the pianoforte, and a Clementi sonata fills the upper register of the room with the clean, precise sound of someone very well trained performing with genuine feeling. Conversations adjust themselves around it. Lady Hartwell moves through the room with the ease of someone who has been managing rooms like this one for 3 decades, touching a shoulder here, pausing for a word there, conducting the whole thing with the invisible authority of a person who knows exactly what she is doing and has never needed to announce it. She does not come to you. She does not exclude you either. She simply has not yet decided what you are. You sit. You breathe. You let your face be composed, and you do not let your hands grip the chair arms. Harriet Somerset keeps you company. She talks gently about Worcestershire, about a dog her family has that is apparently of remarkable intelligence and uncertain breeding, about a cousin who is coming to London in the autumn. You listen, you respond, you are present. And then the door opens and the men come up. The men come upstairs in the loose clustering that always happens after port, some of them animated in the way that men get when they've been talking about things they actually want to talk about rather than things they are expected to want to talk about. Voices still carrying the thread of the dining room conversation. A burst of laughter from 2 of them as they enter. Mr. Thrale comes in with Colonel Farnsworth. They are in the middle of a conversation. The Colonel is talking and Mr. Thrale is nodding with what appears to be genuine attention, and the Colonel has his coat pocket open. Mr. Thrale scans the room. A quick practice scan that covers the whole space in 2 seconds and then narrows. He finds you. He comes to you directly. Across the room, past Miss Ashworth, who is available and beautiful and positioned precisely where an approaching man would naturally find his eye drawn, past several other people who would logically be his target. He comes to you. He sits in the chair beside yours. Miss Crane, he says, I owe you a debt. You look at him. The Colonel showed me the sketch, he says. Then 8 further sketches he carries in his coat for emergencies. We've spent 20 minutes in conversation, and he's told me things about grafting roses onto different rootstock that I'm fairly certain will transform my kitchen garden, and possibly my whole understanding of how plants work. You feel the tension in your chest interrupted. Not gone, interrupted. I'm glad, you say. I'm also going to behave as though the last 20 minutes of the dining room contained nothing of particular note. You look at him. That's generous, you say. It's accurate, he says. The signal at these suppers is impenetrable the first time if you haven't been told. Lady Hartwell runs a more ceremonial dinner than most. Any person of sense could see it was a matter of information rather than manners. I'm not certain Lady Hartwell is reading it quite so generously. Lady Hartwell, he says, is reading it as youth, which she generally finds forgivable. She wouldn't have invited you if she didn't think you were worth the investment. You look at him. The investment, you say. The investment of her social capital in introducing you to people, which is what these evenings are. I'm not saying it unkindly. Everyone here is an investment of someone's capital, including me. Lady Hartwell invited you to invest in you as well? She invited me to stop being a person who refuses to come to these evenings, he says, which I've been for the last 3 years. She decided the period of absence had gone on long enough. A real pause, not uncomfortable, just real. Are you glad she decided that, you ask? He looks at you for a moment. I think I am, he says. Around you, the drawing room moves through its final hour. The music continues. Colonel Farnsworth has accumulated a small audience to whom he is showing the sketches, introduced by Mr. Thrale apparently, and the Colonel's face has the brightness of a man who has found what he came here for. Lady Vane catches your eye from across the room. She raises her coffee cup barely perceptibly. Not a toast. An acknowledgement. You look back at Mr. Thrale. Tell me about Wiltshire, you say. And he does. He tells you about the house, which is Georgian, built in the 1750s and in need of some attention to the east wing. About the land, which is good chalk downland, different from what you know in your family's home county, and different again from London. About the tenants, whom he talks about with the practical specificity of someone who actually knows the people on his land rather than simply knowing of them. About a kitchen garden that has been his project since he returned from London, with mixed results due to the drainage and his own inexperience, which he describes without self-deprecation, but with accurate self-assessment. You ask questions, real ones, not performed interest. He asks you questions in return, about your father's work, about what you find in London that you didn't expect, about what you miss from the country. The questions are attentive in the way that attentive questions are different from polite questions, which is that they arise from what you've just said rather than from a predetermined list. At 10:30, your mother appears at your shoulder. "My dear," she says to both of you, in the tone she uses for endings. Mr. Thrale stands. He shakes your hand. The grip is brief and correct. "Miss Crane," he says, "I hope we meet again soon." "As do I," you say. In the hall, your mother pays for the hackney with her brisk, exact efficiency. The footman opens the door. The night air is cool on your face after the heat of the drawing room, and it smells of horse and June and the particular nighttime smell of London, which is coal smoke and something vegetal from the parks, and underneath everything the ever-present memory of the river. The hackney moves. Your mother says nothing for a full minute. Then, "Mr. Thrale spoke to you for 45 minutes. "He did." "That is significant." "Perhaps." "The withdrawal." "I know." "Lady Hartwell." "I know, mamma." Silence. The hackney turns south through the dark streets of Mayfair, past the bright windows of houses where other evenings are still in progress, other conversations happening in their candle glow. "You recovered well," your mother says. "From your mother, on this evening. This is exceptional praise." "Lady Vane was helpful," you say. "Lady Vane," your mother says carefully, "is someone who had to learn everything she knows the hard way, and has since decided to be useful to people she considers worth the investment. That she considers you worth it is worth noting. She told me to stop replaying the napkin. Good advice," your mother says. You watch the dark streets through the hackney window. A link boy with a torch at the next corner waiting for business. A group of men outside a tavern, their voices carrying brief and then fading as the carriage passes. A woman in the doorway of a house you can't identify, watching the street with the blank patience of someone who watches streets at this hour regularly. "Do you think Lady Hartwell will invite me again?" you ask. Your mother is quiet for longer this time. I think, she says, that it will depend somewhat on what Mr. Thrale does. You sit with this. Outside, London continues its night. Your lodgings on Brook Street are dark except for the candle Bess left in the hall, which she always does when you go out in the evening, the single flame visible through the fan light above the door as the hackney pulls up. Your mother pays the driver. You go inside, upstairs your room. The fire has been banked for the evening, just embers now, a low orange glow at the grate. The room is neither cold nor warm. The looking-glass above the dressing-table reflects the candlelight in the hall, a small bright rectangle in the dark. You sit on the edge of your bed in your evening gown because Bess has gone to her room, and you cannot reach your own lacing and you don't want to wake your mother. You sit in the half-dark. The napkin sound. The specific sound of it, which was barely a sound at all and which you will probably be able to hear perfectly for the rest of your life. The way the quality of the dining room changed in the 3 seconds between you beginning to rise and you reaching the door. The footman's face, which was not looking at you because it is not his job to look at you, but whose very deliberate not looking was its own form of acknowledgement. Lady Hartwell's face. Still. That particular stillness of a woman who has seen everything and is deciding what to make of the latest thing. You sit with all of it, not fighting it, not running from it through useful activity, just sitting in the dark with the truth of the evening, which is that something happened and you don't yet know what it will cost. Your mother will manage it. She will send notes tomorrow. She will read the situation. She will tell you what to do next. She is very good at this. She's been managing limited resources with maximum efficiency for 30 years, and a social error at Lady Hartwell's supper is not beyond the scope of what she can work with. But right now it is just you and the napkin sound and the look on Lady Hartwell's face and Mr. Thrale saying, I think I am. You go to the window. London at 10:30 in June. Not dark exactly. There are lights in windows up and down Brook Street, and the moon is present tonight, casting the pale blue light that makes London look briefly like something other than itself. The sound of a cart somewhere to the south. The sound of voices from what is probably the tavern 2 streets over. A swell and fall of conversation. A dog barking once, distant, and then silence. 500,000 people in this city, each of them in the middle of their own evening, their own calculation, their own small performance of selfhood in a city that requires constant performance. The merchants in their Mayfair houses, the tradesmen in their modest lodgings, the servants in their basement rooms below the streets, the people in the gin shops in Shoreditch and St. Giles, the watermen tying up their boats on the Thames, the night watchmen beginning their rounds, all of it happening, all of it proceeding, completely indifferent to what occurred in Lady Hartwell's dining room at 9 o'clock this evening. The world is very large, and it does not care about your napkin. You're not sure yet if that's comforting or devastating. Probably both. You go to bed. You do not sleep for some time. 3 days pass. In those 3 days you walk with your mother in the mornings. You visit Mrs. Somerset, who has Harriet with her, and who tells you, with the comfortable directness of someone who has nothing to gain from softening, that the story of the withdrawal has been mentioned at 2 tables, and that the general interpretation is that it was ignorance of Lady Hartwell's particular ceremony rather than anything more serious. This is, you know, the best possible reading of it, and you receive it with the relief of someone who's been braced for worse. You receive on the 2nd day a note in an unfamiliar hand. You know it is Mr. Thrale's before you open it, from something about the way it is addressed, which is careful, with the careful pressure of someone who has thought about what they're writing. He'll be at home the following Tuesday, should Mrs. Crane and Miss Crane wish to call, or if they are at home on Wednesday afternoon, he would be glad of the opportunity to wait on them. You read it twice. You give it to your mother. She reads it 3 times. She sets it down on the writing table. She puts both hands over it. Well, she says. Yes, you say. Wednesday afternoon, she says. On the morning of the 4th day, the letter from Lady Hartwell arrives. It is 40 words. Her hand, thin, upright, precise. She hopes Miss Crane found the supper enjoyable. She hopes to see Miss Crane again in the autumn. Colonel Farnsworth has written to say Miss Crane was most attentive to his conversation, which the Colonel valued especially. Your mother reads it with the careful expression of someone reading a diplomatic document. The autumn, she says. She's not refusing me, you say. She's making you wait. It means the error was noted. It means you're on probation. But probation, your mother says, setting down the letter, is not exile. Probation is not exile. Mr. Thraley comes on Wednesday at 2 o'clock exactly. The parlour has been arranged by your mother and Bess with the art of appearing not to have been arranged. The best chair covers, flowers from the market in a jug, the best tea service. You sit in it trying to look as though you haven't been thinking about this moment since the note arrived. He shakes your mother's hand. He sits. He accepts tea. He talks to your mother about the weather, the Nash terraces, the returned soldiers from the peninsula, with the ease of a man who has been trained in polite conversation and is not performing it. He answers her questions with information. He asks her questions with what appears to be genuine curiosity about the answers. Your mother, after about 10 minutes, stops managing the conversation and simply has it. This is, you know, an extremely good sign. Then he looks at you. I've had a letter from Colonel Farnsworth, he says. He intends to send you one of his wife's botanical drawings. The rose. He has a collection of several hundred, and he wishes to give you the original because you understood what it meant to him. Something complicated happens in your chest. That's very generous, you say. He's a generous man, Mr. Thrale says. I think kindness has simply become his nature after enough practice at it. A pause. Miss Crane, I wanted to ask. He stops, collects himself in a way that is very slightly visible, which you find you like because it tells you the question matters enough to require collecting. Would you walk with me on Thursday morning? In the park. Mrs. Crane, of course, if she would accompany us, or if she prefers, Thursday morning would suit us very well, your mother says, with the serene authority of a woman whose prayers have been answered. Thursday morning, Hyde Park in June, the air still cool at 9 o'clock. Dew on the grass along the paths. Your mother walks 15 feet behind you and Mr. Thrale, performing the function of chaperone with the disciplined discretion of someone who is absolutely present and absolutely elsewhere simultaneously. The Serpentine is pewter in the morning light, the surface moving slightly with the wind, the willows at the edge just beginning to lean. I've been trying to find the right way to say something, Mr. Thrale says. You look at the water. The right way to say what? The right way to say that these conversations, he stops, that they happen in a context, that the context is understood by both parties but not spoken, and I would prefer, I want to say something true rather than something correct. Those aren't always different, you say. They are often different at Lady Hartwell's supper, he says, less so here. The park breathes around you. The city exists at the periphery, the rooftops and the chimney smoke. But here between the water and the trees there is bird song and the soft sound of your footsteps on the path, and the particular quality of early morning air in a city that has not yet been fully claimed by its own noise. What's true, you ask? He looks at the serpentine. That I haven't had a conversation in 3 years that I wanted to continue beyond the room it started in, he says, and I want to continue the one we started. The pigeons part for you on the path and regroup behind you as you pass. I'd like that, you say. A pause. I know something of the context from your side, he says. I know your circumstances. I'm not being indelicate. I'm saying I know it, and I want the conversation to happen anyway, with both of us knowing it. I know the context from your side too, you say. Lady Vane told me about your wife. He goes quiet. I'm not going to apologise for the past, he says. I'm saying the half-second is getting shorter. It was longer than I expected, but it's shorter now than it was. Around you the park moves in its early morning way, a rider on the row cantering, a nursemaid with a baby carriage on the far path moving slowly, a pair of geese at the edge of the serpentine conducting their own private negotiation. You don't owe me an explanation, you say. I'm offering one anyway, he says. You walk in the particular silence that is not uncomfortable silence, but the silence of two people who are deciding what comes next and not yet saying it. Tell me about Wiltshire, you say, and he does. And the morning continues around you, and 15 feet behind you your mother walks with her eyes exactly where they need to be, and her face giving nothing away. The weeks after that are a different kind of education, which is the education of being known by someone while you are still in the process of knowing them. Mr. Thrale calls twice more. You walk in the park on 2 further occasions. You encounter him at an evening at Berkeley Square. A smaller, more informal gathering than Lady Hartwell's supper, where the music is genuinely good and the conversation during the interval is better, and where you sit near each other without your mother's management and talk about a poem you have both read and agree on in different ways. You write 2 letters. You receive 2. The letters are better than the conversations in some ways because he thinks in writing in a way that he hasn't yet learned to do in speaking. More complete thoughts, more careful turns, more willingness to say something precise. The second letter you read 3 times and then put carefully at the back of your writing box. Summer lengthens. The days grow hot. London in July is a city that has decided heat is someone else's problem. The horses continuing their work and the tradesmen their trade and the social round its round. All of it pressing on through the warmth with the committed determination of a city that does not stop. Lady Hartwell's autumn invitation comes in September. You accept. This time you know the signal. You know it because you asked Harriet Somerset, who asked her mother, who asked a woman whose maid was Lady Hartwell's maid's cousin. And the message came back. Touch of napkin to lips, then eye contact down the length of the table to the highest-ranked woman at the far end, who then rises and the ripple begins. You know it. You've been practicing it in your head. September. Lady Hartwell's dining room again. Smaller this time, 12 guests. The table shorter, the arrangement more intimate. You're seated 5 places from Mr. Thrale rather than 7, which means you can occasionally hear a fragment of his conversation when the room is briefly quiet. At 9 o'clock, Lady Hartwell touches her napkin to her lips. You are watching. She glances down the table to the Countess at the far end. The Countess rises. You rise with the second wave, precisely. 3 seconds after the Countess, exactly correct. Not first, which would be presumptuous. Not last. On the beat. Lady Hartwell, rising herself, glances down the table. Her eyes pass over you. Something in her expression shifts by the smallest possible amount. Not a smile, not approval exactly, the closing of a question. This is what it looks like to be forgiven by someone who does not forgive publicly. You walk out of the dining room behind Mrs. Somerset, who gives you a brief, warm look as you pass her in the door. Upstairs in the withdrawing room, Mr. Thrale finds you within 5 minutes of the men coming up, which is faster than last time. He sits beside you. You talk until your mother appears at 11 with the look that means it is time to leave. He shakes your hand at the door. "Thursday," he says, "the park." "Thursday," you say. In the Hackney home, your mother adjusts her gloves. "The withdrawal," she says. "Perfect," you say. She allows herself a small smile. "Yes," she says. "Perfect. October comes to London the way it always comes, which is with the particular quality of light that you can only find in this city in this season. A low gold thing that strikes the stone faces of the buildings at an angle that makes them look warmer than they are. The leaves in Hyde Park turning, the chestnut trees going bronze, the sky a cleaner blue than in summer, the coal smoke reduced slightly because the furnaces haven't yet been turned fully up for winter. For about 3 weeks in October, London is almost beautiful in the simple way that places can be beautiful, rather than the complicated way that money makes things beautiful. Mr. Thrale is in Wiltshire for most of October. The estate requires his presence. Something with drainage and a tenant dispute, and a wall that has partially collapsed on the western boundary. He writes 2 letters in the month. You write 2 in return. His second letter includes a description of the Chalkdowns in October that is genuinely good. The quality of observed description that comes from someone who actually looked at the thing he's writing about and tried to put it accurately into words rather than simply conventionally. You read it 3 times. You put it in your writing box behind his first letter. Your mother watches you and says nothing, which is its own form of comment. The season is changing in other ways. The great London social machinery that runs at full capacity from May through August begins its autumn recalibration. Fewer balls, fewer grand suppers, more small evenings and intimate calls. The people who came up from their country houses for the summer are beginning the negotiations with themselves about when exactly to go back, which always involves a specific point at which London suddenly feels too crowded, and one's own acres feel like a reasonable exchange for even the best drawing room. You have been in London 3 years. You know this pattern now. You know which families go early and which go late, and what it means for the social calendar when they go. You know which hostesses continue their evenings into November, and which ones fold their drawing rooms the moment the leaves turn. You know the exact point in October when the park changes, when the morning riders are fewer, and the paths are covered in something wet and golden that the wind has been at. You know these things the way you know your own neighbourhood, which is by having been in it long enough that knowing has become unconscious. You're not in the process of learning London anymore. You simply know it, parts of it, enough of it. This is a strange thing to realise about yourself. You're still, in some fundamental way, the curate's daughter from the country who arrived here 3 years ago, with a dress and a letter of introduction, and a comprehensive terror of everything this city required of her. That person is still present. She comes forward occasionally, in rooms where the stakes feel suddenly very high, in moments where the fork seems to multiply itself and every version of the wrong choice is clear. But that person is not in charge of you anymore. You are. It is a quiet and slightly startling thing to understand about yourself. The letter arrives on a Thursday afternoon in November. The day is grey and has been raining since morning. The particular London autumn rain that is not dramatic enough to be interesting and not light enough to be ignorable. Just a steady grey insistence that makes staying indoors feel like the correct decision. Your father is in his study with his Greek, which is where he is most afternoons. Your mother is writing letters at the drawing-room desk, the small scratch of her pen the only sound in the house for long stretches. You are reading. The letter comes in the afternoon post. It is from Mr. Thrale. You know the hand before you turn it over. He will return to London next week. He has something he wishes to discuss with Mrs. Crane, and, if she is willing, with Miss Crane. He wonders if they might be at home on Wednesday, between 2 and 4 should he call. The sentence structure of this is very careful. You read it twice and then again. You take it to the drawing-room. Your mother looks up from her letter. You hand it to her. She reads it. She sets it very carefully on the desk in front of her. She puts both hands on the desk, not on the letter. Well, she says. Yes, you say. Wednesday between 2 and 4, she says. Yes. She looks at you. Not the managed look, the social composure look. The actual look, which is the one that comes out occasionally in private and which has in it a quality of feeling that the composed version covers. Bess will need to see about the parlour, she says, which is her way of saying, this is happening, this is real. I am going to manage it so that it comes out correctly. You go back to your book. You do not read a single word of it for the next 20 minutes. He comes on Wednesday exactly at 2. Punctual, which is in itself a form of consideration. Other men might arrive at 5 past or 1/4 past, as a small reminder of their freedom to choose when to arrive. He does not do this. He arrives at 2. The parlour is exactly as your mother has arranged it. The flowers from the market. Pale roses because your mother decided on pale roses. The best tea service. The fire properly laid. The room at the correct temperature, which took several adjustments of the coal that morning because your mother was not going to leave temperature to chance. Mr. Thrale shakes your mother's hand. He sits. He accepts tea. He is the same as he has been at every meeting. Present, direct, not performing. He talks to your mother about his return from Wiltshire, the state of the roads, a conversation he had on the coach about the latest news from the continent. He asks about your father. Your mother answers everything. After a while she stops answering and starts listening with the quality of attention she brings to things she's been waiting for. He looks at you. I should say first, he says, and then stops. You wait. I should say that I am aware of the context in which this conversation is happening, and I want it to happen in spite of that context rather than because of it. I want to be clear about that. I understand, you say. I've been slow, he says. I know it. Slower than the situation perhaps warranted. Lady Hartwell has told me so in approximately 20 different ways over the course of the autumn. She's not subtle when she has decided something should happen. She's not, you agree. I needed to be certain, he says. The sort I was feeling was the thing itself and not the shape of the thing. That I was seeing you rather than the idea of having found someone to see. Your mother is very still in her chair. And, you say, and I am certain, he says, I am asking your mother's permission to speak more formally on the subject. Your mother says, you have it. He looks at you. I'm asking, he says, and then he asks. The afternoon light is flat and grey through the parlour windows. The fire crackles. Outside the November rain is back, gentle against the glass, the sound of the city muffled through it. You look at him. Yes, you say. Your mother makes a sound, just a small sound. Then she is composed again. Mr. Thrale looks for a moment like a man who's been holding himself in tension for a very long time and has just very carefully stopped. Wednesday, then, he says, which makes no sense, and which you both find funny, and your mother permits herself the smallest smile. That evening you go for a walk alone, which you're allowed to do in the daylight hours in your own immediate neighbourhood, and you walk the length of Brook Street and turn into Grosvenor Square and stand for a moment looking at number 17. The house looks the same as it always does. Portland stone, iron railings, 6 windows wide, the fanlight dark tonight. You think about the woman who arrived here in Hackney 4 months ago with her best dress and her 7 forks and her comprehensive terror. You think about the napkin, the sound of it, Lady Hartwell's face. You think, look where you are, then you go home. You see Lady Vane at a concert in Wimpole Street in December. She finds you in the interval, which means she came looking, which you have learned is her way of showing consideration. She does not wait for people to come to her. Congratulations appear to be in order, she says. The news travels quickly. It always does, she says. Mrs. Jennings is apparently delighted. Lady Hartwell has told 3 people she suspected this would happen from the September supper, which is an exaggeration but not an outright lie. She looks at you. Are you pleased? Very much, you say. She looks at you with the assessment you've come to find steadying rather than alarming. Good, she says. He's worth being pleased about. He's a careful man. In my experience, careful men are the ones who know the value of what they have, which is rarer than it should be. You look at her. Lady Vane, will you tell me the full story of the second time you were ruined? She raises her eyebrows, then she smiles, which does something remarkable to her face. A letter, she says. I wrote to someone I trusted. The content was careful and the intent was kind, and the person I trusted was wrong to have trusted. The interpretation placed on it was unkind, and the damage was considerable, and for approximately 1 year I was not invited to suppers like Lady Hartwell's. And then Lady Hartwell invited me, she says. Because Lady Hartwell decides who she invites based on her own assessment and nobody else's, which is one of her best qualities, and possibly her only virtue that is entirely pure. She looked at me and decided I was worth the investment, and I came, and I behaved correctly, and the year passed, and here I am. And the person who read the letter unkindly is invited to different suppers, she says, smaller ones. We do not meet. A pause. The thing I want to tell you, she says, is this. The error at Lady Hartwell's supper, the withdrawal, the napkin, that cost you almost nothing in the end. It felt enormous. It felt like the kind of thing that ends a future. It was neither of those things. What it did was teach you something you needed to know, that you can be in the room when the worst has happened and stay there anyway, that the composure you perform in good times is a skill you genuinely have in bad ones. You stand with this. The things that feel like nothing, you say. What are those? She looks at you. The small unkindnesses you don't notice until later, she says. The assumptions you make about people based on where they sit in the dining room. The moments when you have the power and you use it without thinking, she pauses. Those are the things to watch, not the dropped napkin, the things that don't make a sound. The music resumes. You stand together for a moment, listening. Lady Vane, you say. Thank you. For the drawing room in September. For all of it. She looks at you with the direct expression you've come to rely on. Don't thank me, she says. Just do something useful with it. She moves away through the crowd. You stand listening to the music. Wiltshire in the spring, your mother says, which means that is where you will go in the spring, which means that much of what the last 3 years were about will resolve itself into the thing it was becoming. A different life, a different kind of dailiness, the estates and the tenants and the drainage and the roses that want grafting, a kitchen garden that needs attention. You think about it on the carriage home. You think about it in the evening by the fire, while your father reads his Greek and your mother does her accounts, and the city outside your window does its quiet, nighttime things. The sound of the watch, the sound of a cart, the sound of November rain beginning again against the glass. You think about what you know. You know the correct fork for turbot. You know the signal at Lady Hartwell's supper, and you know that at other suppers the signals are different, and you know to watch for them now, rather than to assume they are the same. You know that composure is a skill. You know that staying in the room when the thing has happened is the only response that matters. You know that Lady Vane considers you interesting, and that Colonel Farnsworth is sending you a rose drawing, and that Mr. Thrale says the chalk downs in October are something you should see. You know that London makes versions of you that you didn't know existed until it required them. This is the city. This is what it does. It takes the person who arrived here in a hackney 3 years ago with her 7 forks and a comprehensive terror, and it applies pressure, and what comes out is someone different. Not better, exactly. Shaped differently. Formed by the specific pressures of the specific city, which are the drawing room and the dinner table, and the social hierarchy and the particular cruelty of a world that watches you in total silence and delivers its verdicts in letters of 40 words. These are not the only pressures London applies. There are others, worse ones, that you barely glimpse from your particular position in it. The pressures on the woman in the gin shop, the pressures on the link boy with his torch in the dark streets, the pressures on the footman who stands in Lady Hartwell's dining room with his gloved hands and his disciplined not looking, who has been on his feet since 6 in the morning and will not finish until midnight, and whose name you have never asked. You think about that sometimes. The footman, the napkin on the floor that you left there, the footman who came forward with his white-gloved hands and picked it up without a flicker. You will think about that for a long time, but tonight it is late and the fire is low and your father has put away his Greek and kissed you on the forehead, the way he does on evenings when he's in a good mood, and your mother has folded her accounts, and the house is settling into itself. London outside your window breathes its slow November breath. You go upstairs. Your room is cool. The fire banked to embers, just enough warmth to take the edge off the night. The looking-glass dark above the dressing table. The pearl pins on the dish beside it, waiting for the next evening. You sit on the edge of your bed. The napkin sound is very far away tonight, not gone. Still there when you look for it, with its perfect fidelity to the original. But it is one sound among many now, one moment among many, one version of the room and of yourself among the others that have accumulated since. You lie back. The ceiling above you is a familiar shape in the dark. You've looked at this ceiling many evenings from this position at the end of a London days. Some of the evenings were difficult, some were easy, most were both. Tomorrow there will be things, letters to write, the fitting you've been putting off for the new dress, a call to Harriet Somerset, who is leaving London in January, and with whom you've established a friendship that neither of you is quite ready to call a friendship, but which is clearly that. A conversation with your mother about Wiltshire, and what spring will require of both of you in terms of preparation. All of that tomorrow. Tonight is this. The embers in the grate. The sound of the rain, lighter now, almost stopped. The sound of London doing what London does at this hour, which is continue. The watch. A horse somewhere. A door closing in the house next door with a precise sound of a door that fits its frame exactly. You close your eyes. The drawing room at Lady Hartwell's on that first evening. The honey gold curtains, the pianoforte with the white roses, the chandelier. The 20 people in their best clothes performing, assessing, watching. Lady Hartwell by the fireplace in purple silk, receiving. You standing at the window with your ratafia, frightened in the very specific way that you'd prepared for, and that was still frightening when it arrived. Lady Vane appearing and saying, "I hear you're clever." Colonel Farnsworth and his folded paper. Mr. Thrale near the window, watching the room, not watching the room. The turbot, the small fork, your hand on it, absolutely certain for one moment, then absolutely certain. The napkin, the sound, the walk to the door, and then the drawing room afterward, and the tea you didn't want, and Lady Vane taking it away, and the composure you held on to with everything you had, and Mr. Thrale crossing the room to the chair beside yours and saying, "I'm going to pretend the last 20 minutes contained nothing of note." That is the evening. That is the whole of it. From the candles in your lodgings to the hackney home, from the first curtsy to the last handshake. That is the evening that started something. Not because you were perfect. You were the opposite of perfect. You were a curate's daughter with new gloves and a rehearsed curtsy and a terror of her own forks, and you dropped your napkin in front of 30 people when it mattered most, and the sound of it was clear and exact in a silent room. And then you walked to the door, and then you stayed in the drawing room, and then you sat there with your composure and your terrible tea, and you were present for the next thing. That's the whole of it. Stay in the room. That's the rule that lives underneath all the other rules, underneath the fish fork and the withdrawal signal, and the correct form of address for a viscount's daughter, and the precise depth of curtsy for a countess. Underneath the number of calls you must make after an evening like this, and the exact weight of a thank you note to a hostess, and the art of appearing interested in drainage systems in Wiltshire. Underneath everything, stay in the room, your thoughts slow. The way they do when the body has decided sleep is the correct next thing, when the muscles release their day-long tension, and the mind lets go of its inventory, and the sounds from outside become background rather than foreground. The embers in the grate make a small sound, just a settling, just the coal contracting as it cools, the smallest possible sound in a room that is otherwise quiet. London outside your window goes softer, or you do. 200 years from now, someone will lie in a room in a city at the end of a long day. The streets outside will be unrecognizable. The hackney carriages will be gone, the horses gone, the link boys with their torches gone, the watch calling the hours gone. The quality of darkness in a street will be different because the darkness itself will be gone, replaced by something that makes the night a different kind of night. The city will be different, but the end of a day will be the same. The warmth of a bed, the sounds going softer, the mind releasing the day's inventory of fears and forks and faces and what you should have said and what you actually said. The whole performed, complicated, accumulated weight of being a person in a world that watches. The human body deciding it has been a person long enough for one day, and it is time to stop. That doesn't change. It has not changed in all the years there have been people at the ends of days, putting down the day's weight, letting the room go dark, letting the sounds go soft. It will not change. Let sleep come. Let it come the way it came for the woman who lay in her room in Brook Street in November 1814, at the end of the evening that changed things, at the end of the year that made her, at the end of the day's long performance. Let your thoughts slow and soften. Let the drawing room go. Let the white tablecloth go, and the 7 forks, and the fish fork correct in your hand, and the napkin on the floor, and Lady Hartwell's face, and Mr. Thrale crossing a room to sit beside you. Let it all soften into what it will become, which is a story you tell about who you were before you became who you are, which is a year you lived through, which is the beginning of something. You're warm enough, you're safe enough, you're here. Tomorrow there will be letters. Tomorrow there will be Wiltshire and spring and a kitchen garden that needs attention, somewhere in the future getting closer. But right now there is just this, the dark room, the quiet, the city breathing. Let the sounds go further. Let the last thought go. Let the rest come up to claim you the way it always does. At the end of enough days, the rest that is genuinely rest. The darkness that is actually dark. The quiet that is actually quiet. You've earned this. Not because you were perfect. Because you stayed in the room. Good night. Let's go back to the beginning of this evening. Because the beginning is where the terror lives and the terror is worth understanding, because it is specific to this time and this place, in ways that deserve more than a glancing description. The year is 1814. The month is June. Napoleon Bonaparte, who has been the central fear of European civilization for 20 years, surrendered to the Allies at Fontainebleau in April. The abdication was signed on the 6th of that month, and the news reached London, and the city exploded with the particular joy of a population that has been collectively holding its breath for 2 decades, and has just been told it can stop. There were illuminations, there were bonfire parties in every park and square, there were celebrations in the streets that went on for days, and that involved a quantity of alcohol that was itself a form of historical documentation. The Tsar of Russia is in London in June. Alexander I, who survived Napoleon's invasion of his country, and who is widely credited, among other things, with having engineered the coalition that finally brought Napoleon down. He arrived in June, and London went slightly hysterical again. Women mob his carriage. He attends the opera and the theatre and a series of formal entertainments arranged by the Prince Regent and by every hostess in Mayfair, with sufficient standing to attempt one. He's reputed to be charming and sad and very tall. You've seen his carriage twice, surrounded by outriders, moving through the streets of Mayfair with the crowd pressing in around it. You were not among the women who mobbed it, because your mother specifically requested that you not do this, but you watched from the pavement and felt the pull of it, the specific excitement of being near someone through whom history has moved. This is the London you're living in, not the London of grinding poverty that also exists here, not the London of the docks and the workhouses and the gin shops, though all of those are present and running at full capacity as they always are. The London of your particular position, the Mayfair of drawing rooms and park walks and carefully managed social appearances. The London where the most consequential thing in your daily life is whether you are invited to the right suppers. This is a small world. You know it is a small world. You are 19 years old, and you're not entirely unaware of the existence of the larger one. But this is the world you are in, and the stakes of it, for you and for your mother and for your father, who loves his Greek and is not good at money, are real and pressing and not available to be dismissed. So, the morning of the supper, you woke early, which you often do when something significant is happening, your body alerting itself to the weight of the day before your mind has finished waking up. The sounds of Brook Street coming in. A delivery cart. Early, before 6. Moving south with the low rumble of something heavy. The distant sound of a church bell marking the hour. A dog somewhere. June morning light, the particular quality of it. The white and gold that comes in around the edges of the curtains at 5 in the morning and fills the room with a brightness that is too early for the day, but too insistent to ignore. You lay in it for a moment, looking at the ceiling. Today, the supper. Your mother was already up when you came downstairs, which you expected because your mother's sleep on the nights before important occasions has always been abbreviated. She was at the writing table with a list. Not of things to do. Everything that needed doing had been done already. The dress checked, the gloves purchased, the right hackney man engaged. The list was something else. You did not ask what it contained. Breakfast was subdued. Your father, who is genuinely oblivious to social anxiety in the way that people are oblivious to things they have decided not to notice, talked about a problem in one of his Greek texts with the absorbed happiness of a man who finds his work entirely satisfying. Your mother listened with the practiced attention of a woman who has been listening to Greek textual problems for 20 years and who manages this without resentment because she has a different kind of intelligence and has been deploying it in different directions for the same period. You drank your tea. You thought about forks. The rest of the day passed in the odd, extended slowness that days with important evenings at their ends always have. You read. You walked with your mother in the morning, a short walk, to Grosvenor Square and back, which your mother called taking the air, and which also served as a final reconnaissance of the approach to Lady Hartwell's house. You practised your curtsies in your room at 1 o'clock. You sat with a book in the afternoon and read the same paragraph 4 times. Then Bess came and it began in earnest. The dressing, the stays, the dress, the hair, the pearl pins that are not real pearls. There is a particular quality to getting ready for an evening like this one, which is the quality of assembling armour. Not comfortable armour. Stays are not comfortable, and the precise arrangement of hair required in 1814 is not comfortable. And white gloves, while elegant, make your hands feel enclosed in a way that takes some adjusting to. But armour nonetheless, every element of your appearance selected and placed with intention, every detail serving the function of presenting to the people in Lady Hartwell's drawing room the correct version of who you are, which is a young woman of good family, respectable circumstances, correct education, who is worth meeting and worth knowing and worth considering. This is the version your dress presents, your mother's version. It is not a false version, but it is a carefully curated one, in the way that everything presented in a Regency drawing room is curated, in the way that every person in that room is presenting the version of themselves they have decided to show. The city outside the window is doing its Thursday evening things, the specific quality of a June evening in London, when the day's heat is receding, but the sky is still pale and the streets are busy with the commerce and the movement of 600,000 people, shop fronts, carriages, chairs, servants with packages, vendors calling the last of their stock, a newspaper boy at the corner selling the evening papers, his voice carrying the headlines in a practised shout. Napoleon, the peace, the Tsar's visit. These are the headlines. These are the things the city is discussing in its coffee houses and its clubs and its taverns and its drawing rooms and its back kitchens, the great public drama of a city at the end of a long war. And underneath, the private dramas, the individual calculations, The woman in her lodgings on Brook Street pulling on her white gloves with the care of someone handling something important, doing the arithmetic of her evening. This is the thing about living in a city. You're always both of these things at once, the tiny private life and the enormous public one, the specific fear and the general exhilaration, the hackney cab crossing Piccadilly while the Tsar's carriage passes going the other direction, all of it at once. You closed the door of your lodgings, you walked down the steps, you got into the hackney, and then the evening happened. You know how it went, what you didn't know, getting in, what you couldn't have known. That Lady Vane would find you at the window with your ratafia and say, "I hear you're clever." That Mr. Thrale would be standing near the far window with his slightly wrong cravat, doing the same quiet inventory of the room that you were. That the supper itself would be manageable. That the fish fork would feel right in your hand. That the conversation with Mr. Pemberton would be easy. That the syllabub would be excellent. That napkin would fall. That you would walk to the door. That on the other side of the door would be the drawing room and Lady Vane taking your teacup away, and the slow rebuilding of composure, and Mr. Thrale crossing the room to the chair beside yours. You couldn't have known any of that in the hackney. You were just going, just showing up, just doing the thing your mother and your circumstances and the arithmetic of your situation required you to do. That's all you were doing. And it turned out to be enough. Not because you were perfect. You have already been very clear on the fact that you were not perfect. You were a curate's daughter in new gloves with a practice curtsy and a fish fork you'd spent 3 evenings identifying by weight. And you dropped your napkin in front of 30 people at the moment when it mattered most. You were not perfect, but you were there. You stayed. You kept going. And the world, which is much larger than Lady Hartwell's dining room and which does not care about your napkin, kept going too. Outside your window, the November night is settling into itself. The rain has moved off eastward, toward the river and the docks and the mouth of the Thames and the sea beyond it. The stars are making their first appearance, faint through the coal smoke and the cloud, but there. London at night, from your window on Brook Street. The quiet version. The version after the day is done and the streets are finding their way back to something that isn't exactly rest. Because London doesn't rest, but isn't the full noise of daylight either. This is the city, all of it. The drawing room and the kitchen below and the gin shop and the hackney cab and the park in the morning and the chalk downs in Wiltshire where you haven't been yet but will go. All of it happening at once in every direction, in the dark. Your breath slows, the embers in the grate, the sound of the rain gone, the ceiling, the dark, the quiet that is not quite silence but is as close to it as this city gets. Close enough. Rest now. Everything else is tomorrow. Good night. But before the supper, before the drawing room, before Bess and the stays and the smell of the tallow candles, there is London itself, which is the thing you have to cross to get there, and the thing you have been inside for 3 years, and which you still do not entirely understand, which is probably the correct relationship to have with the city of this size. London in June 1814 is a city in the middle of something it doesn't have a name for yet. The word modern exists but doesn't mean what it will mean. The word industrial exists, but the thing it will describe is still gathering itself in the Midlands and the North, not yet arrived in force in the drawing rooms of Mayfair. The city is expanding in all directions, not quickly by the standards you will read about later, but visibly. New streets being cut, new squares being built, Nash's terraces going up along the Regent's Park's edge with the confidence of a man who has a powerful patron and the vision to use his patronage aggressively. 500,000 people, perhaps more. Nobody knows exactly. There is no mechanism to know. The census of 1811 counted roughly 1 million people in the area considered London, but this includes everything out to the edges of what the city considers itself, and within that number are contained entire worlds that do not touch each other except at their edges. Mayfair and St. Giles, a half-mile apart and a universe separate. The city with its merchants and clerks and bankers doing the work of commerce from morning to well past dark. The docks to the east, where the Empire's trade arrives and departs. The borough south of the river, where the theatres are and where the river smells most strongly, and where the houses lean into each other as though they've forgotten how to stand alone. You live in Mayfair, in one of its less expensive streets, in one of its less elegant lodgings, but Mayfair. Your mother insisted on this when they came up from the country, and she was right to insist, because a dress in London in 1814 is not just a convenience, it is a statement, and a statement cannot be taken back. From your window on Brook Street you can see the back of a house, whose front opens onto Grosvenor Square. Sometimes, in the evening, you see the light in those windows and wonder at what is happening inside them, which is to say you wonder at the version of this life that has more room in it, more ease, more certainty. The version where the dress does not cost 2 months' salary, and the gloves are not a considered investment. Your mother would say, "Stop that. What you have is what you have. Work with it." Your mother is right. But you are 19 and human, and sometimes you stand at your window and look at the light in someone else's window, and feel the full weight of what you are trying to do in this city, which is find a foothold on a cliff face that doesn't acknowledge the difficulty of climbing it. The city is very beautiful sometimes, not in a simple way, in the way that things are beautiful when they contain both what is good about them and what is terrible, when you can see both of those things at once without either cancelling the other. You have walked through Covent Garden in the early morning when the market is being set up, the flower sellers arriving before 5, the men unloading cabbages from carts in the blue pre-dawn. The smell of it, flowers and wet earth and vegetables, and underneath, always, the particular smell of London, which is horse and coal and the Thames, all mixed together into something that is unpleasant by any individual component, and strangely, permanently attached to your sense of home. You've walked through St. Giles with your mother, not through it, past the edge of it, because your mother would never take you through it. But you have seen enough of the edge to know that the London of your Brook Street lodgings and the London of St. Giles are the same city in the way that the same body can contain both health and disease. Same streets, same sky, different worlds entirely. The gin shops. You have seen them at the edges of the poorer streets, the low doors and the steps going down. You've not been inside one. You've been told enough about them to know what is happening inside them, which is a form of desperation that looks like pleasure from the outside and costs more than it charges. Women and men and sometimes, God help them, children, drinking themselves past the point of feeling, because past the point of feeling is sometimes the only rest there is from a life that has no other rest in it. Parliament has been trying to do something about gin for decades. It has not succeeded. You cannot legislate away the need for oblivion when the conditions that create the need remain. This is something you understand with the practical clarity of someone whose father is a curate, and who has therefore spent her life at the intersection of spiritual care and practical poverty, watching the gap between what the church prescribes and what the streets require. Your father baptizes the children of people who live in St. Giles. He buries them there too, often much sooner than he should. He does not talk about it at home, particularly, but you know it is what he is made of. The knowledge that London contains both of these things, the drawing room and the gin shop separated by not very many streets and an unbridgeable distance. You think about this sometimes, riding in the hackney to Lady Hartwell's supper. You think about the footmen who will serve you tonight, who have been at their post since before 7 in the morning. You think about the cook, somewhere below the elegant rooms you're heading toward, who has been working since before you woke this morning to produce the meal you will eat in the next few hours. The kitchen below, you will not see it. You've never seen the kitchen of a house like Lady Hartwell's, because women of your position do not go below stairs in houses where they are guests, and the kitchen is below stairs in every sense. Below the formal rooms, below consideration, the invisible engine of the visible perfection. But you can think about it. You have enough knowledge of kitchens from your childhood, from your mother's management of their own modest household, from Bess's occasional comments about what she has heard from other servants, to construct something of what is happening down there right now as the hackney crosses Piccadilly and heads north toward Grosvenor Square. The cook will be at her range. Not one range, several probably, for a kitchen producing 43 dishes for the first course alone. The range is coal-fired, which means it is hot, which means the kitchen in June is at a temperature that does not permit comfort, and the cook and her kitchen maids have been working in that temperature for the better part of this day. Their faces will be flushed. Their hands will be burning to the touch. The fine bones of their wrists will be tensed against the weight of pots they lift and carry and tilt, and set down again in the choreography of a professional kitchen in full operation. The pastry cook, if there is a separate one, will have been up since 5 to get the oven to the right temperature, and to have the small cakes and the tartlets and the crystallized flowers ready before the heat of the main cooking makes the pastry kitchen impossible to work in. Sugar work requires cool hands and a cool room. You do this in the morning or you do it badly. The kitchen maids will be washing and peeling and chopping and straining and reducing and skimming. The scullery maid will be at the sink without pause from the moment the first pot wants cleaning. There are pans whose bottoms have been blackened by fire and must be scoured with sand and elbow and patience. There are stocks that have been reducing since yesterday, bones and vegetables and herbs given up their essence into the liquid that will become the basis of the sauces that will appear on your plate in a couple of hours under silver covers, looking effortless. This is what effortless costs. This is the arithmetic of a supper like Lady Hartwell's. The 40 footmen and the cook and the kitchen maids and the scullery maid and the butler and his under-butlers and the housekeeper who's been managing the cleaning and the linen and the flowers and the candles and the coordination of 30 people working in a house that must appear to require no work at all. This is the invisible machinery behind the visible performance. This is what the white tablecloth costs. You know this, and you sit in the hackney with your new gloves and your £4 dress, and you are part of the performance too, in your way. You are performing the correct version of a woman attending this supper. You're producing, through effort and practice and 3 years of your mother's instruction, something that looks like ease. Nothing at Lady Hartwell's supper looks like effort. Everything at Lady Hartwell's supper is effort, all the way down. The hackney arrives, you get out. You walk up the steps, you go into the drawing room, and all the things that happen, happen. The conversation with Lady Vane, who appears from nowhere and takes your measure and offers you useful information, with the efficiency of someone who has decided not to waste her time on people who won't use what they're given. The introduction to Mr. Thrale, across a room that is suddenly smaller than 62 feet, and the conversation that is not a performance of a conversation, but the thing itself. The supper with its 43 dishes and its 7 forks and its soup from the side of the spoon, and the turbot with the small fork, and the syllabub that tastes like June, the sound of the napkin, and then the drawing room, and the composure you held on to, and the tea Lady Vane took away, and Mr. Thrale in the chair beside yours. These things happen, and they mean things, and the meanings take time to become visible. The way the meanings of evenings always take time. The way the significance of any particular moment is never fully clear in the moment itself, but assembles itself afterward, over days and weeks and months, into something that can be understood. What you understand now, in November, at the end of the year that started in that drawing room, you understand that Lady Hartwell has been running a particular kind of experiment all her life, which is who stays in the room, who comes back, who does not let the difficulty of the terrain become a reason for retreat. She does not forgive easily, which is to say she does not pretend that errors didn't happen, but she is entirely capable of deciding that a person who made an error and recovered from it is more interesting and more valuable than a person who never made one. The 2nd October supper, and the correct withdrawal signal, and the small shift in Lady Hartwell's expression. This was her assessment completed. This was the verdict. You understand that Mr. Thrale spent 3 years being the kind of person who doesn't come to these evenings, and that Lady Hartwell decided it had gone on long enough, and that she was right, and that the mechanism by which she was right involved a curate's daughter with a fish fork and a napkin on the floor, which is not how such things usually go, but is apparently how they went this time. You understand that Lady Vane is someone who was ruined twice, and rebuilt herself twice, and has since been more useful to more people than she would have been if she had never been ruined at all, which is not an argument for ruin, but is an argument for the possibility of what comes after it. You understand that Colonel Farnsworth carries a rose sketch in his pocket, and that in the half-second before he knows what it is, she is still there, and that this is both devastating and exactly right, and that the drawing Colonel Farnsworth has sent you, rolled carefully in a tube of cardboard with a brief note saying only Miss Crane, who understood, is now in your writing box next to Mr. Thrale's letters. You understand London better than you did. Not completely, not nearly completely, but better. You understand that the city is enormous and does not care about your napkin, and that this is the correct relationship between large things and small humiliations. The large thing continues, and the small humiliation becomes something you carry rather than something you are. You understand your mother, not completely, but better. You understand the 3 weeks of choosing fabric, the 6 shillings for gloves, the practised curtsy, the careful calculation of the hackney fare and the exact depth of bow, and the precise moment to leave. The 30 years of managing limited resources with maximum efficiency, the 30 years of performing for a husband who loves his Greek and is not good at money, the work of keeping a respectable life going with the tools available. She is formidable. She always has been. You are only now beginning to understand the scale of what formidable has cost her. You love her completely. This is a thing you know. November. The room is dark and the fire is embers and the rain has stopped outside and London is doing its quiet Thursday night things. You're in bed. The ceiling above you is familiar. The room is cool and quiet and just warm enough, There will be Wiltshire in the spring. There will be chalk downs and a kitchen garden and a house in which you will be required to do something your mother was required to do. Manage a life with the resources available. Maintain what matters. Produce from effort the appearance of ease. You're not afraid of this. You are, if anything, looking forward to the kitchen garden. Your eyes are heavy. The sounds outside are getting softer, or you are. The draw of sleep is specific and real. The ache behind your eyes from the candlelight of the season's evenings. The tiredness in your shoulders from holding them correctly for so many hours. These are the comfortable tiredness of a body that has been used. The pleasant ache of effort. You let your breath go slow. The napkin is very far away now, not gone. You will be able to find it any time you look for it, with perfect fidelity, for a very long time. But it is one thing among many things now, one moment in a year of moments, 1 second of the long performance of being yourself in a city that watches. You stayed in the room. That's the whole of it. That's enough. The sounds outside your window become part of the dark. The watch, a horse, something, a cart probably, coming from the market, moving south along Brook Street with the particular sound of wheels on cobbles that you've been hearing every night for 3 years, and that has become, without your noticing when it happened, the sound of home. Home. You came here from somewhere else. You'll go somewhere else from here. The somewhere else will become home in its turn, the way places become home, by accumulation, by the slow deposit of days into the sediment of knowing a place, until the knowing is so deep it stops being conscious. For now, here, Brook Street, the cool room, the embers, the rain-washed air coming in around the edges of the window frame faintly, carrying the smell of London and November and whatever the next thing is, waiting somewhere beyond the dark. You let it come. Let the day go. Let the evening go. The drawing room and the dining room and the hackney home and the November parlour and Mr. Thrale's careful sentence structure and your mother's hands flat on the writing desk. Let the whole year go. The 7 forks and the napkin and Lady Hartwell's face and Lady Vane's directness and Colonel Farnsworth's rose sketch and Mr. Thrale near the window of a drawing-room in June, watching the room with the same quiet inventory you were conducting. Let it soften. 200 years from now, a person will be listening to a voice telling a story about a woman in London in 1814, and they will be in a room of their own, in a city that bears some resemblance, and no resemblance to the one in the story, lying in the dark at the end of a day that had its own forks to manage and its own performances to produce, and its own moment of the napkin falling, or something equivalent to it, the moment when the thing happened that shouldn't have happened and the room went quiet and you had to decide what to do next. You stayed in the room. Most days you stay in the room. That's the rule, the only one that really matters. The sounds go soft, the thoughts go slow, and then softer, and then slower. And then just the dark room and the quiet and the breathing and the sleep coming up to claim you, warm and particular and yours. Take it, rest, let it come. Good night.